So it's come to my attention today that a lot of people who have not been around physical disability or neurological disability um, often mistake these things for psychiatric problems when they're looking from the inside out. And they take things personally when it's not about them. And it's very, very frustrating because this is why a lot of families break apart when someone gets sick in the family and has a long term disability. And so I'm not going to give you guys the context because it's not necessary, but basically it's I've heard this a lot because it's one of the biggest reasons I'd get into it with my siblings and stuff like that, is that they would get upset because I would wait till everybody was home to cook. And I've been doing this for over a decade because my mind's been going and I've burned stuff. I burned myself. I've cut myself. I've injured myself. So a few years ago, instead of fighting with everybody, I tried to communicate my needs. When my needs were not listened to, I spoke to my mom about it. My mom said it was fine, but everybody else around us mistreated me for doing this. And, oh, you always wait till I'm in the kitchen to do. Okay. So it got to the point where I started kicking everybody out of the kitchen to cook because otherwise I would make more mistakes and I would burn myself more because I was fighting with my siblings while trying to get my shit done. Already having mental clarity problems and brain fog and being attacked by family members, making it worse when my needs yelled that I could not cook when I was home alone to prevent something dangerous from happening. Okay. There's a lot of misconceptions about why that is, and it's because of the lack of communication. And you can be a person's friends and talk about boundaries and communication and everything you want, but both parties must want to communicate. If one party does not try to communicate, you can't play devil's advocate. Because the moment you play devil's advocate, the person who is understanding, if they're disabled as well, you asking them to always be the bigger person instead of teaching the other person boundaries causes a shit ton of problems. It causes a shit ton of problems, and it's not a compatible roommate situation. And this doesn't matter if it's family or if it's a situation, because y'all are doing all this pairing and stuff like that, pairing disabled people so that they can afford to live independently. A lot of the times, that's the reason these pairings do not work, because essentially you have caregivers playing the role of referee with ailments that they don't comprehend themselves. They see it as psychiatric issues when in fact it could be a neurological or even a physical issue that they're having. And now you've gone and labeled them as something in your mind, and now you're treating them differently because of that. You're either treating them differently, giving them too much consideration when a boundary needs to be set, or you're not giving enough consideration when accommodations need to be met. So the person in need doesn't get their needs met, and the person who is causing the problem gets away with causing the problems all the time, because essentially you're not putting your foot down. And yeah, so there's a huge misconception with that, especially when you are one of those people that does not comprehend neurological or physical disorders. And I got tired of explaining it to my family, so I stopped fighting with them and I started kicking them out of the kitchen. Yes, I wanted them to be home so I could cook, but I started kicking them out of the kitchen when I would cook. So they started seeing me as an entitled bitch and blah blah blah, always leaving a mess. However, for the most part, I would cook, eat, and wash my dishes. When my dishes weren't washed, it usually was because I was having a physical disability. But because they were, in fact, using weaponized incompetence, they thought that I was doing the same to them. Because anytime I was washing the dishes, my brother would go to his room and pull out all the dishes from his room, so I would have to wash the dishes. My sister did this, my nieces and nephew would do this, and my mom would just tell me to be the bigger person and do it. Okay. Then why was it weaponized incompetence when I could not get my dishes washed and I didn't have the physical capability to do it? Why was there no understanding or comprehension? Do you see where you can spend your life meeting other people's needs, including as a caregiver, and you will burn yourself out because there's a fine line between compassion and accommodation and enabling and allowing. So really take that into consideration when you are encouraging, because they're encouraging caregivers to encourage their patients or their clients to do certain things. You can encourage and still have boundaries. If you get too attached to those clients, you're going to burn yourself out. I know this from experience. I'm not saying it because I don't know what I'm talking about. You're going to burn yourself out, and you're going to let them get away with things. Also, if you care about them too much, you're not going to push them when they need to be pushed. So people lose the ability to walk. People lose the ability to feed themselves, clothe themselves, shower themselves. They lose all interest in even bathing, especially when dementia, and it's fear-based. It's fear-based. It has nothing to do with mental or psychiatric disorders. It's fear-based from the neurological disorder that is forming. So if you don't know how to spot that, do not give your opinion first and foremost. But if you don't know how to spot that and you don't know how to set boundaries around it, please do your research. A lot of people are doing informative videos on how to teach you how to deal with this, or talk to experienced caregivers who have dealt with this so that you can be a better caregiver, whether it's your family member or you're doing it professionally, because no one pays enough to do that job. And no matter how much you love a person, no amount of love that you have that person will prevent you from getting sick, from putting your needs aside. And you cannot help that person if you get sick from putting your needs aside. I'm saying this from experience, not because somebody told me. I wish somebody would have encouraged me not to do so much for my sister and my brother, instead of forcing me to do shit for my sister and my brother, instead of them growing the fuck up and doing their own thing. So just keep that in mind, because it breeds entitlement and it breeds anger and resentment. And the person pointing the finger at who's entitled is usually the person who's entitled. And that's why I don't talk about this certain aspect of kitchenware. But the thing is that if you do have a family who has chronic illness, you need to know this. You need to know this, because otherwise you're creating the problem, because you think that they're weaponizing their need to be in the kitchen when you're home, because they're afraid to burn the kitchen down, burn themselves, or cut themselves. All because you think they have a psychiatric disorder and you don't realize that they're deteriorating. And without you realizing that you're deteriorating, and without you being the observant motherfucker that you need to be, when you go to doctor's appointments, you can't tell the doctor how they're deteriorating. So all you say is that their personality is changing, and you're setting them up to be gaslit by doctors and be treated like they have psychiatric disorders when they have neurological conditions that need to be examined and further explored. But doctors will stop the exploration there, and they will let the person deteriorate, because family members are lying, because they're observing, but they don't know what they're observing. So if you don't know what you're observing, don't automatically jump to the conclusion of psychiatric. And if you don't know what you're observing, also don't jump to dementia, because trauma looks a lot like dementia. It looks like a lot like dementia, and until you take that person out of the unsafe situation, whether they can acknowledge or admit that it's an unsafe situation, you're never going to know if it's trauma-based or if it's actual dementia. It's that simple. And some people cannot leave their spouses. Once they're 90 and shit like that, they honestly cannot do it. So you're stuck dealing with a person that will deteriorate as if they had dementia, solely based on the trauma, and not wanting to, or not being able, because sometimes they want to, but sometimes they're not able to leave the unsafe situation. So just keep that in mind. I love you and have a beautiful day.